First breaking news coming in from federal court. Norfolk City Treasurer Anthony Burfoot has been found guilty on 6 of 8 charges in his corruption trial.
This verdict just came down minutes ago in a trial that has lasted 20 days. 10 on your side's Jason Marks has been on this case since the beginning. Jason.
James was...
Yeah, guys, as you just mentioned, 6 of 8. He was found guilty on the 2 honest services wire fraud. He was found guilty on the 2 obtaining property under color of official right. And then he was found not guilty of 2 of the 4 perjury charges. The perjury charges coming from his testimony during the Bank of the Commonwealth trial a couple of years ago. The jurors got into the room around 11 o'clock. That's when they started deliberating this case. They had a lot of information to go through. As you can imagine, this was a 5-week-long trial. We had more than 90 witnesses, and so they had a lot of evidence to sort through. At about 3:40, the jurors came out, asked one question, and they went back in, and then about 4:30, about an hour later, there was another knock at the door. Everyone kind of stood up like, is this it? And then that was it. And then we heard the verdicts read not too long after that. I'm going to bring back in Andy Protogyrou again. And Andy, once again, we left off, if you're with us, we were talking about testimony and key testimony, and I thought one of the big pieces of this was Keith McNair's testimony. Keith McNair was Anthony Burfoot's best friend. He was a college friend. He used to be a bail bondsman. When Anthony Burfoot was elected in the treasurer's office, he actually brought Keith McNair into the treasurer's office with him, and his name came up an awful lot during this trial because everywhere Keith went, Anthony was right there with him. And Andy, when you heard that Keith McNair ended up testifying for the prosecution, now remember, he was a defense witness at this point. He was subpoenaed. He told the defense attorney, Andrew Sachs, that, hey, if you call me up to the stand, I'm going to take the fifth. I'm not going to testify. And then when you heard he cut a deal against his best friend, what was your reaction?
Well, Keith, as you had said, wherever you saw Anthony, you always saw Keith downtown. They were always together. You know, when you're your best friend, there is no privilege as if it was a wife. And so the testimony can be damaging. And so Keith had been with Anthony a long time, but keep in mind, there was very good cross-examination of him also. So the jury had a chance to actually get to the truth of what was going on. And they had a chance to weigh that when Keith was testifying.
Let me real quickly go through these counts again and then explain to me what they are for people at home. Okay, so we have the 2 counts guilty of honest service wire fraud. What does that mean exactly?
Basically, it's that somehow a telephone or a cell phone was used in setting up a meeting or a deal to get together and to receive a bribe.
And so to talk about that a little bit, here's what the prosecution said. The wire fraud, when Anthony Burfoot got Tyvest to do deals in the Broad Creek area, the Tyvest had to bring in contractors from out of state. And then also the one other thing was when, right before the Midtown Office Tower project, the final vote, the 5-3 vote, right? We all know about Dwight Etheridge's and his unpaid taxes. He had a lot of unpaid taxes. And what happened is Dwight Etheridge came into the office the day before the vote, and Anthony Burfoot allegedly told him, you need to pay those taxes because you guys wouldn't have voted for that if he had unpaid delinquent taxes, correct?
Well, I can tell you this, it wasn't getting voted on by 3 of us no matter what the taxes were at the time. But we did hear at the last minute those taxes were paid. We were told immediately before that they had been met.
And because Dwight Etheridge used his sister's credit card, the credit card purchase was from another state, thus the wire fraud. Okay, let's go to the next 2. The next 2 were the property of under color of official right. What does that mean?
That's just accepting some type of bribe, whether it's cash, whether it's a car, whatever it may be, as a bribe.
And then obviously the 2 of the 4 perjury charges found guilty on. Now I asked you, this was all the Bank of the Commonwealth, correct? And yes. I think what you mentioned to me is that what they did is they put up a count for each time they thought he lied about a subject during that trial.
That's correct. Each one of the counts had a specific lie. And so the jury had the testimony from the Bank of the Commonwealth case. They could read that, and in fact, Anthony read that to them at one point with he and Andrew back and forth. And so then they could decide whether or not he lied at a specific time during that testimony under oath.
Now, obviously, he took the stand. He didn't have to take the stand in this case. No, Anthony Burfoot, now I'm talking about his case here. He did not have to take the stand. Are there more perjury charges?
No, I think what you'll see is that there could be obstruction, and obstruction, he went to trial, he testified, they're going to say untruthfully. That will add most likely 2 points to his guidelines. The federal government runs things through guidelines. And the guidelines in this case run around a 34 as we look at the numbers, which comes somewhere between 155 and 181 months or so, 151 to 81 months or so to serve. So it's 12 and a half to 15 and a half
I know you said you worked up the guidelines.
Yes.
Can we see them again?
Sure.
Let's.
If I may.
I know you can't see them here, but we're going to read them to you here. Explain to me what the numbers are here.
Well, what we do is you look under the honest services, because that's going to be the engine that drives this train. So, and that comes in at a guideline base level of 14. He's going to also get, because it was over 250,000, he gets 12 points enhanced. So that's added to the base level. Because he was a public official, he gets another 4 points added on. Because there's more than one bribe, he should get another 2 points added on. And then obstruction adds another 2 points.
So what does this all mean for the person sitting at home and for me standing here?
It means that he's going to serve, most likely the guideline range will come in at 151 to 188 months. The judge will receive that at the time of his pre-sentence report, sometime most likely in April, and at that time period for his sentencing. And that's the active time that the court will sentence him to, most likely somewhere in that range.
So we're talking about anywhere between 10 to 12 years?
12 and a half to 15 and a half.
And you think that Judge Morgan will take 12 and a half?
Well, it's never good for any lawyer to guess what another judge is going to do.
Okay, fair enough.
But the guidelines, the courts usually stay within the guidelines. Anthony's got a lot going for him, but I also believe that the court's going to want to make an example, as they have other public officials, that they need to stay within the guidelines. Bob McDonald came below the guidelines, and I know Andrew's going to work that case to get it below the guidelines. But I think you went through a long trial in this case. You had a lot of testimony. He testified. That's the guideline range.
And stick around, because I want to ask you about, when we come back, about how the Bob McDonald testimony and the trial here in the Supreme Court ruling had an impact on this case, and if it had any. But I want to ask you about that. Yeah, well, we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. Once again, Anthony Burfoot found guilty of 6 of the 8 charges here at Norfolk Federal Court. This after the jury deliberating all day long. I'm going to send it back to you guys. We're going to have complete coverage. Still waiting for Anthony Burfoot, Andrew Sachs, and the prosecutors to come out of the courtroom. They should be out any moment. Now back to you guys.